Since the 2010 elections, in which Republicans did so well, particularly in the states, America's Republican Party has been laser focused on jobs, by which I mean abortion. In the Republican-controlled House of Representatives in Washington, the third bill that Republicans introduced upon gaining control of the House was an anti-abortion bill. See, it's H.R. 3. They do them in numerical order. Then the line in the sand over which Republicans threatened to shut down the whole federal government was their effort to defund Planned Parenthood. Now, in the second year of their majority in the House, congressional Republicans are still working on anti-abortion legislation all the time. They are fighting right now to restrict abortion rights in Washington, D.C., since Congress has some control over the district's affairs. That has led D.C. residents to stop by one Republican congressman's office last month with a long list of other more pressing issues he might take on if he cares so much about D.C., things like potholes and vermin infestations and parking tickets and so on. In the Republicans' presidential primary this year, that abortion above all else climate has led to a race in which not only did all the leading candidates say they would overturn Roe versus Wade to make having an abortion a criminal act, but beyond that, all of the leading candidates for president on the Republican side this year said they supported personhood for fertilized eggs. It's a legal idea designed by the right to outlaw the most common forms of contraception used in the United States while also outlawing all abortions. That was at the federal level. At the state level, it has been an anti-abortion free-for-all since the 2010 elections, with more anti-abortion legislation being introduced and more being passed than at any time since it became a legal constitutionally protected right to get an abortion in this country in the early 1970s. So after that laser-like focus on jobs, by which I mean abortion, it seems like now, maybe, in this current news cycle, maybe, the pendulum is swinging back in the other direction. Or at least people who are on the other side of the issue from Republicans are starting to make some real noise about how far Republicans have swung the pendulum since the 2010 elections. Today in Michigan, for example, Republicans got a performance that they did not ask for, but they definitely did earn. As you may have heard, particularly on this show, last week, state Republicans banned two Democratic lawmakers, both women, from speaking on the floor of the Michigan House. It was the first time in anyone's memory that lawmakers had been censored like that. It began during a debate on a new omnibus Republican anti-abortion bill that expands the state's right to regulate abortion clinics out of existence. I mean, not accidentally, intentionally onerous regulations designed to shut down abortion providers. The measure passed in Michigan mostly along party lines, but during debate on the bill, female Democratic legislators argued against it vigorously. And one legislator used a word that got her sent to the penalty box by the Republicans in charge.
I have not asked you to adopt and adhere to my religious beliefs. Why are you asking me to adopt yours? And finally, Mr. Speaker, I'm flattered that you're all so interested in my vagina, but no means no.
For that comment and a few others from Democrats that day, the Republican majority floor leader in Michigan banned State Representative Lisa Brown and another woman Democratic legislator from speaking. That was last week. Fast forward to today, and this was the rather incredible scene outside the Michigan Capitol. Playwright and activist Eve Ensler there to perform her most famous work, the Vagina Monologues. The state legislator whose comment caused all the hullabaloo in the headlines, she and 9 other legislators starred in the play. They used the word that must not be named more than 100 times. So that's Michigan. In Virginia last week, home of Governor Ultrasound, the state's Board of Health there did something shocking. The State Board of Health in Virginia last week decided not to make it more difficult for abortion providers to operate in Virginia. Well, Virginia Republicans had wanted to do the same kind of thing they're trying to do in Michigan. They had wanted to pass intentionally onerous regulations, specifically targeting abortion providers to put them out of business. But the State Board of Health unexpectedly voted to block the Republicans' move. The State Board of Health voted to exempt existing abortion providers from the new rules that seemed specifically driven to shut them all down. The board made this vote against the advice of Virginia's radically anti-abortion Republican Attorney General. The decision now goes to Governor Bob McDonnell for review. So that's going on in Virginia. In Florida, over the weekend, 1,200 mayors from all over the country gathered for the 80th annual Conference of Mayors. At the end of the three-day conference, the mayors issued a list of adopted resolutions that they all voted on, things like anti-violence programs and drug treatment and education. Also on the subject of reproductive rights, the mayor's resolution recognized 10 different ways in which women's health care was being restricted and women's rights were being impinged across the country. The resolution affirmed the importance of women's reproductive rights, and it called for Congress and the states to improve women's access to safe and comprehensive reproductive health care. So that's the nation's mayors. But wait, there's more. Today, a group of Catholic nuns launched a bus tour of 9 states from Iowa to Virginia. They're calling it Nuns on the Bus. Nuns drive for faith, family, and fairness. After the Vatican said in April that nuns in America are spending way too much time on social justice issues and caring for the poor when they really ought to be focused on being good anti-abortion activists, the nuns decided no. The nuns decided instead to travel around in their bus now, talking about other things. They're now, for this week, for example, talking about how much the Republican Paul Ryan budget that Mitt Romney says he would adopt as president would hurt the poor and the sick and the people who nuns can't help but be nice to and be concerned about even when the church tells them to focus on other things. So whether or not all these developments mean that the pendulum really is swinging back, or people are at least getting mad about how far the pendulum has swung, I have one thing to say here personally, not as a TV show host here, but just as a person who happens to be related to some nuns. Don't mess with nuns. This is not a warning, it's not advice, it's not a threat. It is a fact that I have learned from personal experience. Ask anybody in my family. If you mess with nuns, you will lose every time. You will always regret messing with nuns.